Hi, welcome to the NSG video series. Today we are very happy to have with us Professor Lorenzo Casaburi. Professor Lorenzo Casaburi is an assistant professor at the Department of Economics at the University of Zurich. His research focuses mainly on agricultural markets, on sub-Saharan Africa, and on state capacity with an emphasis on tax enforcement. He holds a PhD from Harvard and a BA from the University of Bologna. Professor, thank you so much for being here and to answering these questions. So first we would like to ask you to talk briefly about the paper you have just presented and to tell us the main results.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks very much for having me today. So my main paper studies the fact that in many developing countries, poor people have problems in saving money because of limited access to banks, or maybe because of theft risk, or because of psychological problems. They try to save, but then later they can't succeed and they dissave what they were trying to set apart. One implication of these problems is that poor people often look for unconventional saving devices. And in our paper, what we show is that one of these unconventional saving devices is the frequency of payments. So we show that in central Kenya, dairy farmers who sell milk every day actually like to be paid not every day, but only once at the end of the month. Because lumping a lot of small payments into one big payment at the end of the month help them reach saving goals, like, for instance, having enough money to buy feed for their cows, or school fees is another example. And then we study how this affects the dairy market in which they operate and their relationship, for instance, with the buyers to whom they sell milk.
Okay, thank you. What are the policy implications of your results?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of work on the fact that individuals have problems in smoothing consumption from one payday to another. So in this work, the policy implication is that one should be paid at very high frequency, for instance, every day, so to smooth consumption. Our paper, at least in this setting, proposes a different result, which is if the purchase of these lumpy goods that requires a lot of money all at once is an important part of the consumption portfolio, then infrequent payments may actually be welfare enhancing by allowing households or producers to have enough money at once to make these purchases.
Okay. You have a lot of experience on conducting experiments related to savings in developing countries. Why do you think it's so important to do those experiments in developing countries? So what is the main difference between the savings profile of the poor there as in contrast to here?
Yeah, so let me start by just saying that focusing on saving and on these barriers to saving is something quite recent, last 10 years or so. Obviously, economists have put a lot of attention to things like credit and microfinance, but I think that it's very important to understand how to improve saving behaviors, because a lot of financial goals can be achieved through that channel rather than through credit or loans. Now, I do believe that poor people may face different challenges than people in richer countries when it comes to saving. So one of these that has been documented is that access to banks is sometimes very limited, for instance, in the settings where I work in rural Sub-Saharan Africa, that's the case. And so transaction costs, for instance, may be higher. Another type of barrier, as I mentioned before, is related to behavioral biases or self-control problems. And a growing literature is showing that poverty exacerbates this type of behavioral biases. For instance, our ability to stick to a plan, to a financial plan, may be particularly endangered where we are pressed with other urgent issues concerning food consumption, for instance. And so in some very influential work, for instance, Professor Mulenathan has highlighted exactly this perverse tension in which poverty exacerbates behavioral biases, and then in turn the opposite is true. More behavioral biases exacerbate poverty. And so this is one type of circle that may be particularly detrimental in developing countries.
Okay, and in recent years we have seen an increase on instruments such as M-Pesa. Do you think that's the way to go? What's in your opinion?
It is definitely true that digital tools or digital banking may play a big role, and the pervasiveness of financial access in, for instance, countries like Kenya has had a major increase with the development of M-Pesa. Now, one recent piece of research shows, for instance, that access to M-Pesa has a big effect in the ability of households to mitigate shocks through remittances. If I experience a shock, now that I have mobile money, it's much easier to deal with it by getting in touch with maybe my cousin who is in the city, who can immediately transfer money. And so insurance and risk management is a channel that research has already shown to be improved with the development of this mobile money. Ongoing work on digital credit is also very important. For instance, in Kenya, there are good systems of mobile loans, for instance, for electricity consumption, in which through mobile money, poor households can access electricity and get payment through these mobile money platforms. And understanding whether in turn this mobile system can also significantly improve saving behaviors is certainly a plausible hypothesis and something to be explored in future research.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor.
Thanks very much
it was a pleasure.